Aw.
See?
Is that your family, Sam?
It's not my family. If it is your family, give me a call.
Claim it.
See? I bought that one just to get it back to the family.
I think I told you this though, but I there is a group, like I think I have like a Facebook page, and they go out to like secondhand stores, like a Goodwill and stuff like that, and Savers and stuff, and they try to find family photos, or like something like that it has the photo on it, or like artwork that like a kid did or something,
Yeah.
and they try to find the family that it belongs
I kind of do that with records.
But yeah.
I have a collection. I collect records, and among my records that I've been collecting lately are ones that are produced for a specific purpose, not mass production, but like your church, your high school, whatever it is, put together something, and they have a limited run of records. You know, they'll produce a couple hundred records maybe. And I have one. It was from a high school, and the sleeve itself was only printed on one side, so the back side is white. And the previous owner used it to get the band members of the high school band to sign it like a yearbook.
Oh, cool.
So there are all these autographs on the back side of it, and written on it is the woman's name whose it was. And I found her on Facebook, but she has yet to respond to my inquiry because I wanted to see if she was interested in getting her thing back. Yeah, right. It's got all these names on it, that all these people that she knew who were in the band. Like,
even if you don't want it, we want the stories.
Exactly. No, I would just like to hear the stories. That'd be so cool. And, but I have a whole bunch of them like that.
That is cool.
So yeah. So, welcome to Sam's record collection. Spin-off of Afternoons with Kendra and Sam.
Welcome to Afternoon. We're here at the Boyertown Museum of Historic Vehicles Library.
The library. My favorite. Actually, my favorite part of this museum. I love the cars and the trucks. I love the display and everything about it, but I could just sit in this library for days.
Yeah, there's a lot here. And even right before, when I was looking for a couple things to talk about, I saw, I should sit down and read that. Ooh, that looks good. Ooh, we should do an exhibit about this.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
So yeah, libraries are dangerous places for me as well. We kind of went through an organization in here a few months ago. We still have a lot to do, but we made a big dent in it because this library has just sort of grown. Like, you get a box of books grown
is like grown like a weed because it has just spread and it has just covered everything, and as my father once said, it's not a weed if you like it.
I agree. I tell my kids that weeds are just the things you don't want.
Right.
So if you want your lawn full of dandelions, then they aren't weeds anymore.
We had this thing grow in front of our house that was like this tall.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know nothing about botany. Like, Dad, isn't that a weed? He goes, weeds are something you don't want. I like that one. Okay, whatever you say, Dad. So, but this is the weed that I like.
Yeah.
This growth of books, and I do historical writing, so I have a nice collection of books myself. Mm-hmm. But when I find a book that I don't have that I need, jump all over that one. Look at this. I go to used bookstores all the time looking for something interesting, something good. Usually, most bookstores do not have a good automotive collection.
No.
And the ones they do are picture books. They're coffee table books.
Right,
and,
right.
And I'm
probably have one of those in my stack over here to talk about.
Well, look, I got one right here. Look at this.
Yeah, tractors.
Yeah, there's a good book on collectible tractors here that is mostly
photos,
large pictures of tractors.
Yeah,
and that's
so not necessarily research.
No, it's great stuff. So you can see a picture of what that looked like and what it was. But if I'm doing research, I need somebody else who has done research and told me, the story that I need to hear about whatever it is.
I wonder why that is, why you don't find them in secondhand stores. And I guess they're already kind of niche. So
I've
there's
talked to
already fewer people buying them in the first place.
right. We're a minority. And,
Yeah,
and
ergo
so-
fewer people getting rid of them.
Right. Oh well, yeah. We don't want to get rid of them.
Well, that's the thing too. Is they seem to go out of print
Yeah.
relatively quickly, or so then you don't want to let go of them.
Right.
You know.
Right.
But if you need a Mary Higgins Clark book.
Oh.
Or
Sure.
a Chicken Soup for the Soul book. I'm sure you can find plenty of those at used books. Although I do love used bookstores because you will come across some real gems in there. Plus, I just like the smell of a used bookstore.
Yes. Yeah. I'm always looking for car books and kids books. There are a couple kids titles, and I'm not telling you what they are because they'll go up in value, and I want to go find them. But there are a couple kids books that I really, really want.
Oh, there's a kids book that I really want, and I'll say it because it's already like a couple $100 on Amazon. The Little Old Man Who Could Not Read.
That one I do not know.
Just a great book.
I have to look for that
We wore that, well, my brother before me wore that out. It was pretty tattered by the time it got to me. But it's a great book. It's this little old man, lives with his wife, but his wife goes away to visit her sister or something. So she leaves him this like shopping list to go buy stuff for him to make food, but he can't read. So he goes there and he like, instead of a box of spaghetti, he buys like a box of waxed paper and what is he? He buys French onion soup instead of like chicken noodle soup that
Okay.
he likes, and so he has a miserable time while his wife is away. And then she comes home and she teaches him how to read.
We had the Richard Scarry Greatest Storybook Ever.
Oh my God, Richard
That-
Scarry, yes.
I love that book, and whenever I have a friend who has a child, I will I'll buy a copy of
Mm-hmm.
that, write an inscription, and send that to them because I think that's the greatest book because as a parent reading to a little kid, you really don't want to get a long chapter book. You don't want to get into, and this one has
Multiple stories.
dozens of stories in it, and they are 3 or 4 pages long, and they have nice pictures to them.
Yeah.
And so I can read these stories, and I have a couple of them memorized, and I literally haven't read that book in 20 years, but I have a couple of stories memorized that I can. We had Goodnight Moon.
Oh,
that
yes.
Apparently everybody had. I never had this when I was a child, but my kids learned how to go to sleep to this book, and to the point where it was part of our routine to put kids to bed.
Mm-hmm.
And we went on vacation one time, and I didn't have the book. However, I had read it so many times,
It was
I had it memorized to the page turns. So I would sit the kids on my lap and read the book and flip the pages as if I had the book because I knew the whole book straight through. And the same works with my favorite story from the Richard Scarry book is Couscous.
Couscous.
Couscous, the Algerian detective.
Yes.
And I would do the voices and everything. I loved Couscous. So Couscous and Good Luck in Rome. Those are the two that they would go to the Trevi Fountain and they would go down the Spanish Steps, and it was great. So
Yeah, kids' books can be fun, or the opposite spectrum, infuriating because you've done reading them.
well,
But they can be fun.
try reading Racing in the Rain. Racing in the Rain is a fantastic book. They made a movie out of it a few years ago. There are two versions of this book. The Art of Racing in the Rain, which is the adult version, and Racing in the Rain, which is the young adult version. And I read Racing in the Rain to my kids. And I will not spoil the ending to it, but the narrator of the story, is going to die at the end of the book from the beginning
Oh,
because of the way it's told.
the inevitable is coming.
So the last page, I literally could not read. And I'm reading it to my daughters, and my one daughter is stoic. And I'm like, could you just read this last? I literally couldn't see the page. And I said, could you read this last page? She goes, why? Just, could you please read this page?
Help your father out.
And she started crying. And I look over at her sister, who's starting to cry because her sister's starting to cry. And I'm like, I have to read this by myself now. So I had to push through the last page of this book, and it was so sad, but it's such a good book, though.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell me it was horrible.
Oh no, it's a fantastic
Okay,
book.
I'll have
But
to
Patrick
look that
Dempsey,
up.
I think, did the movie,
I don't remember
and
this at all.
it's an excellent book, but it's just heartrending. It's
Yeah.
just so on to lighter notes.
Yes, on
When
to
I-
books here. which
When
are
I
not
was a kid, I was
heartrending.
always into cars.
Yeah.
And My favorite section of any library was section 629, which was where all the car books were.
Doing the Dewey.
The Dewey Decimal System,
Decimal
I know one number in the Dewey Decimal System, and it's
The one
629.
that was important to
That's
you.
the only one. 629, there's where I'm going to go. And so I wore out books at my library.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first ones I ever got was this one, The Ford Road.
Ah.
It took me years to find a copy of this later, but in the 70s, Ford had this published for their 75th anniversary. And so, from a Ford perspective, so it's not a
Sure.
great historical book.
No.
But it does have a
Neat
lot of pictures.
photos
of-
I can already
of
see.
Period photos of Ford, and I think it ends with a picture of. Here's Henry Ford II in one of the first Fords, but I know there's near the end here. This book was published right around the time that Lee Iacocca was fired, and I'm pretty sure he's in this book here.
It looks like a good selection of like publicity things that they did, which I love stuff like that, publicity and marketing stuff. So
There's Henry Ford II again. So this was I loved this book. I must have taken it out multiple times. I was a Ford fan when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. But this is such a nice book. It's faux leather bound.
Leatherette.
It's padded. But later on, I realized that this book was published like Automobile Quarterly.
Oh, it's part of a set?
I'm pretty sure this one is not an actual Automobile Quarterly magazine, but it's similar. Mm-hmm. And when I was a kid, my neighbor had a collection of old cars. Mm-hmm. And he introduced me to automotive history. And Doc Gordon took me into his family room, and he had a collection of Automobile Quarterlies because he was a charter subscriber.
Yeah.
And if you were a charter subscriber, if you were a specific subscriber, your name would be printed on the book.
In gold.
Embossed on the book. And it was just, his books had the name on them. And this was probably 15 years into the run of those books. So he had 15 years worth of these books. As the name says, this is 4 times a year. But they're published like this, and magazines are normally portrait, and these are landscape, which is great because you can have, if you're taking pictures of a car, you want them to spread across the page. I picked this issue. This is volume 4, number 4, which is my favorite issue because
I love that you have a favorite issue.
I do. They published Automobile Quarterly well into the 50 volume set.
Yeah.
And then if anybody's getting rid of the later ones, I'm looking for copies of those. I have up through about 41 or 42 filled, but I'm looking for some holes after that. But this one, I was writing an article a number of years back for the Society of Automotive Historians, and they were putting together one of their magazines that featured Duesenbergs sold or bodied in Europe. The whole issue was dedicated to just Duesenbergs that were sold in Europe. And I was talking to the editor of the magazine as he was putting it together, and I said, one of my favorite Duesenbergs was the 66 Duesenberg. They tried to revive the brand in the 60s. And as we talked about before, Virgil Exner designed this car. It's very ornate. They built one. They never actually put them in production, but they built one. And it was based on a series of drawings that they were supposed to revive old brands.
Okay.
And so they said, if this brand were still around today, what would it look like in the early 60s?
How would it have evolved?
Right. And so here's what they would have looked like. And there's an article in here about that. That's how the article is in here. And I needed that for my article. So we went to car shows. We were looking during flea markets, and I was looking for this one. And I remember going to one
Looking for
guy.
volume 4, issue 4,
Exactly.
sir.
4 is the one I'm looking for. And I went to a stand, and this guy had a bunch of Automobile Quarterlies. And he said, "Are you looking for any one in particular?" I said, "Yes, volume 4, number 4." And he had a grid that had 20 volumes and 4 numbers across there and pricing for each issue. And we go down through 4. It was the most expensive issue on the sheet.
Of course it was.
This was 20 some years ago, and it was $75. These issues you can find these at flea markets and stuff for $5 or $10 a piece. This one was $75.
Oh my gosh.
And so I'm like, oh, I can't afford $75 for background for an article. I'm not
Yeah.
even collecting them. And when he
Right,
heard
right.
that I wasn't collecting it, he goes, give me your fax number. And he faxed me the article, the whole article. So fast forward to another car show, and we find the issue at a flea market. And my buddies, it was right around my birthday, my buddies were with me, and they said, we'll pay most of the price of that book for you for your birthday. I said, great, let's do it. So we bought the magazine. I think it was $75 or $80, whatever it was. This was at a flea market at Lime Rock. We walked on about 20 minutes later, and they were closing up the flea market, and somebody was selling stuff. They had just stuff. And there was one issue of Automobile Quarterly sitting by itself, and it is Volume 4, Number 4. And it says $5 on it. And my friends and I went, oh my God, this thing. And we had already bought it from someone else.
Yeah.
So I wasn't going to buy another copy, even if it was $5. And we turned to the guy and goes, you can get more money out of that one. And the wives came out of the van and said, what? Something's underpriced? I'm like, yeah. This should not be $5. This should be somewhere closer to $75. And I'm like, really? I'm like, yes. So I do have a copy of that. I got it relatively cheap. But so the
I
4-4.
wonder why that one was so.
Well,
is
because
it,
it
is
has,
it the Virgil Exner
I think
lore?
it is this article about
Yeah,
Exner
is that-
here, where here's the 67 Duesenberg article, where they have drawings of the car and all kinds of
that's
great
wild.
information. It's got beautiful pictures of the car. It's just a fantastic article. But they have all these. This magazine in itself is just, every issue is great. And this
I was
one in
going to say,
particular.
in general, it's a really nice publication. The articles are really,
Well researched.
Yeah.
The people
photos
who,
are great.
Oh, fantastic photos. The people who've written them are a who's who of automotive
oh
stories.
yeah.
I was fortunate enough to know two editors of the magazine itself. Jonathan Stein, who lives near us actually, because these used to be published in Kutztown,
Yes, yep.
and the late Beverly Rae Kimes, who was an idol of mine. But
I've read a couple of her articles in AQ for research on our own vehicles and to do the signs. She wrote one in there about the Biddle automobile. The museum has 2 Biddles in the collection, and I think her article is called "A Little on the Biddle" because there really is not too much meat to that story. I mean, it's an interesting story, but it's a very typical, family thinks they're going to make it big building cars, but they outsource most of it. There's very little that they themselves built or patented with that vehicle. They just kind of
yeah.
cobbled together things.
That's
to
how
make
a lot of
car.
car companies were at that time. But
Yeah.
but the Biddle family was very well known in the Philadelphia area.
Yep.
And to put your name on a car is the epitome of having made it in early 20th
That
century
is-
industry.
Yep, that is some status.
So you put Ford on the car, you put Chrysler on the car, you put
Yeah.
whatever your name is. That's how you show. The DuPonts even had cars.
I'm going to pick up 2. So, speaking of putting your names on a vehicle, these 2 books always intrigued me. One is the history of the J.G. Brill Company, which is a Philadelphia trolley builder. They did some work, though.
Is that the Brill Building people?
Well, see, I thought the Brill Building was in New York City. That's what I always think of. Wasn't there like the Brill? That was a music thing.
I thought it was an office building, but I could be wrong.
Brill, They did trolleys, but then, like in World War II, they switched to, like all companies, to war production. So they have an interesting story, but this is written by Deborah Brill, so a family connection. And then, I love this, the Fruhoff engineering story, which is written by Ruthie Fruhoff,
Wow.
who is a super awesome lady, and got to meet her, and she was here at the museum and at the McCungy Truck Show a couple years ago. I got to meet her. But, she talks about all that this was her dad and her grandfather. So she has like a true connection and a true love for this. And she has all these great photos from the marketing and stuff that Fruhoff did. And she is doing a lot of work. I don't think this is her only book either. I mean, there is stuff written in here. It's very heavy on
I love old advertising
ads.
like that.
I know.
Yeah.
Old ads I have a soft spot for old ads. So there's Lockheed, all the different companies, the refrigeration that refrigerated trailers that they had, what they did in World War II as well. But she has a true love for this because it's her family, and it really comes through, and I really enjoy reading it and thinking about how I got to meet her. When you meet the author, that's special.
Absolutely.
As I'm sure you've met some of these people that written for AQ and other books. It's a little more special when
absolutely.
you've met them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was fortunate enough to be at a car show one time where Janet Guthrie, the race driver, Janet Guthrie was selling her book, and she was autographing them. And so I have two daughters that I was always trying to find a way to inspire them coming from a male-dominated family. I was always trying to make sure that my daughters never felt like they were behind the boys.
Yeah.
I always was warned of that the girls are treated as second-class citizens. I'm making sure my girls understand they are not. So I met Janet Guthrie. I'm like, I need this autograph to my daughters, and so I have an autographed copy of
That's
Janet
so
Guthrie's
cool.
book for my daughters.
That's so cool.
And other people I've met, we were talking about Bev Kimes. This is not Bev Kimes' book. There are 4 volumes to this set.
Wow.
This is the standard catalog, and this was very important when I was researching stuff for Chilton. This book in particular, I have 2 copies of it, and one of them, the spine is broken because we used it so much. When I wrote repair manuals for Chilton, and Chilton repair manuals were typically only 3 or 4 model years old. We only covered a few back, unless the big books that we did. But we would do a particular make, and it was always the big 3. It was always General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, and then just the top imports, usually just the Japanese imports at that time at least, because there was not a market for any of the others. But we did one book we called it the Cascade book because it was a company that Chilton had purchased. And Cascade, the book itself, was an inspection guide. It was not a repair manual, but it was an emissions inspection guide.
Oh, wow.
It was designed for California, but we were spreading it across the country. And it covered every vehicle sold I think it had to cover every vehicle sold in volumes of over 500 from 1966 to what was then 1993. And the original Cascade book was thin and covered things like all Nissan models, 1977. And I'm like, that doesn't work that way. So we had to research the book from ground up. And so the table of contents was published for that book, and I turned to the editor of the book and I said, any of these brands that you do not recognize, I will do. So I got to do everything that Chilton didn't normally cover. So I got to do Rolls-Royce and Citroen and all these different things. Anytime there was one that they go, who is this? Send it to Sam. So Sam did it. So everyone else would borrow this book from me. It was on my shelf, and they were like, oh, I got to look up old MGs. I got to look up whatever it is. So they would pull this out to find out what cars were available that year, because we had to do the engines for each year.
Oh, my gosh.
So the book got well used.
I
I
bet.
still have it, but it's got a broken spine, and I bought a second one. I actually had Chilton buy me a second one because we had worn out my first one. So I have 2 copies of it. But this one is written by James Fleming, who I have met. He's an automotive writer in the Chicago area. He's a great guy, very knowledgeable. But all the books in this series were written by great historians. James Fleming did the import book. If you look at the first American book, which is 1805 to 1942, it was co-authored by Henry Austin Clark, who was a world-famous historian, and Beverly Rae Kimes. And she also worked on the post-war one, which goes through 75, which is volume 2.
Oh, did she?
She did.
Oh,
And these books are great starting points
they are.
for any research
Yeah.
on American cars, and this is just cars that were imported into the United States, so it does not cover cars around the world, all cars around the world.
Right.
Just the ones that were sold here, and this is just since World War II.
Like you said, they are good starting points, especially for the really early stuff. That encyclopedia of cars from 1840,
1805
to 1942, that's like the Bible around
Oh, yeah.
here. Because,
Absolutely.
you know, and what's really, there's so many car companies, and they weren't around for very long at all. But at least in those books, you know, you might only get a blurb if it's one of those, but you'll get the name of, you know, the principals
Mm-hmm.
or the founder. You'll get a town that they started, and you'll get a basic idea of what they claimed to have built or wanted to build,
Yeah.
or maybe built one of, you know, built a little.
Claim to have built is really good.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them would advertise in a newspaper that
Right.
we're going into production of a vehicle that we designed. And proof that it actually happened is
My favorite, and I like to think that Beverly wrote this, is when it says at the end, production is doubted.
right,
I love
right.
that
Well,
phrase.
we have another book floating around here. I know we have at least 2 copies around here. The American Car since 1775, I think it's called. I know I have 2 or 3 copies myself. That is an Automobile Quarterly book, and Bev wrote that one, or at least edited that one. And it has a rundown of all cars that were built here, but it has a page, it has a section of brands that probably never turned a wheel. I think that's what the section is called. So it's all those ones compiled together that were supposed to have built a car, but probably did not.
Probably didn't.
Yeah, I have a few of those in my knowledge, because in the small town I grew up in, a gentleman once told me, found out I liked old cars, and he goes, you know, they built a car in the next town over. I'm like, they did not, because the town I grew up in was the big town of 4,000 people of the county. And he said the next town over, which was half the size, they built a car. I'm like, there's no way. And I did research, and they built a car.
A car.
And with the idea that they were going to series build them. The car they built was fantastic. It was around 1900, 1901, something like that. The car still exists.
Oh, cool.
It's a dream of mine to get it into the museum because it was built in Pennsylvania.
So cool.
But I found registration. I found the original 20 cars registered in Bedford County,
And it's.
and it's number 3 or 5. I forget which
Wow.
one it is. But another car that was supposedly built locally was either 3 or 5. The other one, and I have no proof that it actually got built. They registered it, but it may not
Yeah.
have ever been built.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot. Yeah, they register for the trademark or something.
Well,
or-
this was actually registration, because
Oh my
registration was
gosh.
local. So if you
That's
drove
true.
through an area, you would register it, because there were people from Cumberland, Maryland, or somewhere else who would register their car because they would drive it to Bedford.
Yeah. Or they build one, and they have these grand ideas to make to do production numbers, but building your first one and building a production
Yeah,
are 2 totally different things.
absolutely.
And a lot of companies never got over that next hump.
Yeah, in 1900, if you built 100 a year, that was a large number of vehicles, and that was very difficult because they're going to be hand built. You don't have an assembly line yet. You don't have the idea of the moving assembly line that Ford
Yeah.
did in the teens. So building more than 100 is 2 a
That's
week.
daunting.
2 a week. That's
That's
and this is
daunting.
a place that made carriages before.
Yeah.
If you're lucky.
Daunting. That put so many people, so many companies out that even did get, even ones that did get to production, the assembly line and the quickness of that put so many people out
Yeah.
because they just can't keep up.
No.
Of course they can't.
Well,
you know.
Ford didn't come
Can't
along
make an
and build.
affordable car
Right.
without
Yeah.
that assembly line.
Oldsmobile
know-how.
built a couple thousand, and that was the largest manufacturer in the world at the turn of the century.
Yeah.
It wasn't till the teens where they got to the millions. But being a mom and pop shop making 100 a year is a large
Yeah.
undertaking.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that's the collector's history of the automobile. This was one of the first car books I ever got.
Oh, I love that cover.
I got this one for Christmas when I was like 10.
It's like in the galaxy.
Yeah, no, it's
great.
such a. That's white paint on it, actually. That's
What?
That's not on the cover. I think the cover is actually black.
Oh my gosh.
Because I do have a copy of this one at
I
home.
thought it was in a star field.
No. That's
from the heavens.
yeah, no, that's splatter from paint. But this book is great because it gives you a rundown of the history of the automobile. My aunt and uncle bought this for me my godparents bought this for me when I was 10. And mine has an inscription from them from Christmas of
Aw.
whatever year that was. And my godparents, God bless them, passed away a few years ago. But they didn't really know what to get me for Christmas. One year they bought me an Aldo Nova record. And I just wanted to see my 65-year-old aunt walk into a record store and ask for Aldo Nova. That one, I wanted to be there to see that so much. But they knew I liked cars. So they bought this book for me, which to this day is still one of my favorite books that I own. A couple years later, they bought me the exact same book, but leather bound.
I was going to say,
Not-
did they forget that they...
I honestly don't think they knew they had bought the same book. But it is the same book, but it is leather bound, and it is barely, it comes out of the box just for me to show people. Because it is the same book, but it's really nicely bound.
Wow.
And it's still in the box that they gave it to me.
Aw.
And it's in beautiful condition. But I have the same book, and thank you, Uncle Bob and Aunt Pauline, for that one.
Aw.
But
I like
this book,
that.
the best story about this one, when I got the book, I gave it to my grandfather, who was at the time probably 85. And he leafed through this book, and he turned to a page on here, and he found a picture of a car, and he goes, "I had one of those." I'm like, "You had one of these?" My grandfather came from Italy and had no education. He spoke just enough English to get by. I don't remember us ever having a real in-depth conversation because
Yeah.
he spoke very little English.
Yeah.
But he was the greatest guy. And this is the longest conversation I ever had with him. He goes, "Well, open the book up," and he goes, "I had that car." I said, "Really?" "Yeah, Model 97. And I turned to my grandmother, who was 10 years younger than him, born in the United States, wonderful woman, beautiful woman. I said, "Grandma, Grandpa said he had one of these. That's a Pierce Arrow.
I was going to say.
That's an expensive car."
It's a very expensive car.
And she looked at me and she goes, "He never had one of those. He had a Model T." This was a really expensive car, and it's on page 97. And it's still one of my favorite memories of my grandfather was him telling me that he owned a Pierce Arrow Model 97. And I'm like, oh, I can't break the man's heart and explain to him that it's page 97 and it's a Pierce Arrow and you did not have one.
Just nod, smile and nod. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, thank you very much. But I had to be like 12, and I'm like, pretty sure you didn't have a Pierce Arrow.
Catching him on his tall tale.
Yeah.
This is not it's not sentimental at all. If you know me at all, I really enjoy trucks, and I really enjoy the delivery trucks and the workhorses. And this American beer trucks, I've always enjoyed just paging through this book. It's mostly photos. I mean, each photo has a caption, so it does tell you a little bit about it. You know, maybe they tell you a little bit about the brewing company, or maybe the body itself. This one, you know, 1946 white with Ohio plates, used by an Aaron Brew distributor. The body is insulated. You know, or I just think this is so cool. A lot of these are like, there's a big chunk of 30s and 40s stuff in here, which to me, the design of those is just amazing, how they try to make these big behemoths streamlined, and they put with the chrome trim and this Miller truck at the bottom
Yeah.
is really cool. I just think this is one of my favorite books to just, when I do have a moment, to just grab off the shelf and kind of look through it a little bit and find a couple trucks. And then you get into the more boxy, ones. But then there's some really crazy ones. There's one in here, it's ready for parade duty, and it's like a float, a 50s Dodge with this beer float stuff on the back, like a huge drinking glass and a huge bottle of beer, and then it has speakers on it that look like Mickey Mouse ears, if you don't read far enough and see that they're speakers. But yeah, I really enjoy this. I like delivery trucks. Can't help
The
it.
great thing about that book is there are plenty of people who collect beer cans, beer bottles,
yeah.
things like that. And to have all those different beer companies outlined by the trucks that deliver them.
Yeah.
And, but the era of the 30s where they started making them as advertising gimmicks.
Yeah.
Making the truck more aerodynamic or a different shape or whatever it is. The Labatt's
Or even
truck.
a novelty shape.
Right. Oh, yeah, the novelty shape where they would, during Prohibition, there were, beer companies still were in business. They still, if you take the Yingling tour, they'll tell you they made beer. They never stopped making beer because during Prohibition, you could buy beer with a doctor's prescription. And on the tour, I asked him, like, okay, so what infection?
illness?
Yeah,
What ailment?
What would the doctor have to see in me to prescribe beer to me? He said, I think the woman said it was primarily lady issues. And I said, really? She goes, yeah, postpartum and things like this. They would prescribe beer.
Mother's
Like,
Little Helper.
really? So apparently you could get those. But during Prohibition, some of these beer companies made beer alternatives, alcohol-free beer. And stuff.
Yes.
I remember one was called Bevo. Bevo beer was non-alcoholic, but they would make these vehicles to advertise them during Prohibition. My favorite one was a early Buick that instead of the body of it, it was a horse, and you actually drove it sitting on the horse.
Oh, yes.
If you ever see a picture of that one, that one's spectacular. Yes.
Those are out and around.
Yeah, but it's literally one of those
Yep.
big statues of a horse mounted on a car, and you actually sat on it and steered the car from the horse.
Moxie Soda had those.
Moxie, right? Yeah. So
Which is not alcoholic, amazingly enough, but
No.
it tastes it
It
sometimes.
it does have a medicinal taste to it. Yeah, but those trucks in the 30s were well designed and very interesting. I keep thinking of the Labatt's truck. There was a beautifully aerodynamic Labatt's truck where the trailer just kind of scoops into the truck itself.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it's a truck and trailer, but it's it looks almost like one.
they kind of
beautiful.
dovetail into each other.
Yeah.
It's really a beautiful design and definitely period. Definitely 1930s. But
Are you out of books?
no, I got one more.
Oh, okay.
I got one
So do I. Okay.
Okay.
I thought you had.
Yes.
I
Well,
thought
no,
you were out.
this one is near and dear to all of our hearts because
The book.
This is the book.
Should have saved that for last.
Well, this is my last one. It's not your last one, but it's mine. So, A Century of Vehicle Craftsmanship was written by, pronounce her name, please.
Erminy.
Erminy Hafer. And she and her husband founded the museum. This one outlines the museum's founding and the local area of manufacturers. So
Yeah.
it tells you, it's great because it tells you the details of where these factories were.
Yeah.
You can find plants in Reading and the greater
Fleetwood
Reading area
and yep. Mhm.
and where the factories originally stood and what they built.
Yeah.
It's a great book to have, and we still have a few copies here for sale, I believe.
Not for sale anymore. We
Oh,
do
no.
have them squirreled away. We don't have many copies left. We've talked about getting that reprinted or updating it, and it's quite a project to actually
absolutely.
do that. We don't, it's funny, like, that book was printed in 76, I think,
I don't have my glasses, so I won't be able to read it, but
the 70s.
I'm gonna take your word for
I
it.
know it was the 70s.
72.
Oh, 72. So, okay, a century. Yeah. 1870 too, when this was founded up to 1972. Or the Carriage Works was founded in 1872 up to 1972. So I've been asked, well, do you still have the book plates?
Oh. Who published it?
Well, it's the same company that published Automobile
I
Quarterly.
wouldn't doubt that, but they are no longer in existence.
Well, they are, but they are in name.
Okay.
They're in Allentown area now. And I did go up there. They don't have this stuff anymore. If it had been the digital age, this would probably be a lot easier to recover.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a topic that comes up.
This one's actually signed by the author.
Oh, wow.
This is
To
a
my
good one.
dear sister, Lorraine. This is a topic that comes up every once in a while, reprinting it. We would definitely, if we wanted to do that, one thing, we'd have to sacrifice a book because they would have to literally rip it apart and pretty much scan it page by page. So that's not as big of a deal, but that's very time and labor intensive.
Yeah.
So it's not a cheap process. So I don't know. We talk about it every once in a while. We hope that some method comes along in technology that makes it a lot cheaper.
Yeah, I have this is a hardbound. I have a softbound copy of that, and it's a great local history book.
It is. I mean, you'll see a lot of museum pieces in there, photographs of them. They're right here in the
Yeah.
museum. But then a lot of really cool, like the truck factory photos, which are
If you've never been to
Once
this
again,
museum, you
always my
must make your
favorite.
way here because the museum itself is in the factory that built carriages in the 1800s, built trucks into the late 1900s, and some of the museum is still that factory, so you can still see how these things were originally made.
Yeah. And while wherever you are, if you're driving here to come see the museum, there are so many
Oh.
cool roadside things along the way. This is a book that has me written all over it because it's kitsch, and I like kitsch. But this was given to us not long ago, actually, like I'd say maybe a year ago. And it's just all these wild roadside kitschy things. I don't know how else to describe it. For instance, you may have heard about this, the Cadillac Ranch in
Car henge.
Texas. Yeah, car henge. They just stick Cadillacs in the ground and they're all
Yep.
painted up. Of course, the cover has these wonderful dinosaurs.
That's your Sinclair dinosaur.
My huge Sinclair dinosaur on steroids. But just the world's largest fire hydrant.
Oh, the Uniroyal tire. I know where that is.
The world's largest ball of twine. This is the kind of stuff I live for. I love stuff like this.
This tire is outside of Detroit.
This one?
Yep. It was, if you can see the bottom picture there, it was originally a Ferris wheel.
Yes.
And the mechanics of the Ferris wheel are still there. They're underneath the tire. I think they gave the media tours of it just a couple years ago. Because I had friends who were posting video and pictures of being inside the tire to see the workings of the Ferris wheel. But it's right along I-75. So if you're driving down I-75, and Uniroyal had a self-sealing tire at one point. And so at the very top of the tire at a while, they had a giant nail. And you could see it from the road, and it was telling you that their Uniroyal tires self-sealed. But it's right along the road. You can still see it.
Coincidentally, not too long ago on our Reading TV show, Dano talked about him attending the World's Fair, like on a field trip with school, and he had photos of this as the Ferris wheel there in Flushing
Nice.
Meadows, and I thought that was super cool.
Yeah.
I'm happy to know that it's still around, although they should put the Ferris, they don't have to operate it, but I think seeing the Ferris wheel cars is really,
It just
very
looks like a
cool.
giant tire now.
Yeah.
But
It was a Ferris wheel.
yeah, but the Roadside America stuff is always
Yep,
always
roadside Americana,
when you're
they call this.
in the early 20th century when we started driving places where the car allowed us to go beyond our town. And so every town along the way needed some way to lure you in, to make you
Right.
stop.
you should stop here
Right.
and eat your lunch.
Right,
Or
because we
stop
have
here and stay
because we have a
overnight.
giant dinosaur out front. Or in Shellsburg, Pennsylvania, there is Storybook Forest. I don't believe it's still open. They would have these giant concrete creatures, things to do, and concrete so that they wouldn't wear away. You know, if you built it wood, then it would have to be
Yeah, yeah,
maintained.
yeah.
But if it was concrete, you could just keep it there. So there are reproductions of all the pieces of nursery rhymes. So you can climb in the old woman's shoe and
Aw.
things like that. But right out front is Little Boy Blue, like 30 feet tall.
Not so little.
Not so little, but he advertises it. He's got the horn and everything, and it's
so
right on
cool.
Route 30. Another one is the coffee pot, which is in Bedford.
Oh, yes, the coffee pot.
The coffee pot used to be a part of a bar. It was attached to a bar, and they were going to tear down the bar to make way for a bigger service station. The people who owned it had a service station there. So they were going to tear it down, and they raised enough money to relocate the coffee pot. So the coffee pot is on Route 30 in Bedford, Pennsylvania. They've relocated literally eighth of a mile up the street. It sits all by itself now. Where it was not a full coffee pot originally. There was a building that came in on the first floor. They've now closed it off, so
Yeah.
it's now just a coffee pot, and it stands by itself, and you can go inside it and see it.
So cool.
But it's at the entrance of the fairgrounds in Bedford, Pennsylvania now. But it's a 2-story coffee pot.
Route 30 was famous for this stuff.
Yeah.
For sure, the coffee pot. There was a riverboat, too,
Oh no,
wasn't it?
yeah, it was.
It's gone now.
It burned down about 25 years ago,
Yeah.
I think it was.
It's a
Somewhere in the
hotel,
90s.
wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was it was just outside of Shellsburg, Pennsylvania, but it stuck out from the mountainside.
Yes.
And it looked like a giant ship, and at one time it was a hotel. It was a restaurant for years, but the reason we always went there, because we never had a reason to stay there, but they had a telescope on the top of it, and it advertised that you could see 20 counties and 4 states, I think it was.
Oh, my gosh.
So from there, you could see Pennsylvania, Maryland, West Virginia, and I think Virginia, from the lookout off the mountain.
That's so cool.
But yeah, it unfortunately
that's-
burned down a few years ago.
That's one I wish I would have been able to see, because I think it's so
Yeah,
cool.
if you can find great classic pictures of cars parked alongside it, and like I said, it stuck out of the mountain.
I have to note in here, because I just watched this movie the other week. The dinosaurs from Pee-wee's Big Adventure
Oh,
are in this book.
Yes.
And there's a segment where Pee-wee sits, they watch the sunrise in the T-Rex's mouth, and he can see the teeth. Sorry, that's a classic movie, and I just
Yep.
watched it, and I
Yep.
was like, these better be in here, and they are. They're in
R.I.P.
California.
R.I.P. Paul Rubens. Yeah.
Loved Pee-wee.
Yes. Just did a lot of research on him recently, just because he recently passed away, and I didn't realize what went into. It was originally an improv character.
Yeah.
that he co-developed with Phil Hartman. Which I didn't realize the two of them worked on that together. Phil
Yeah.
Hartman was on Pee-wee's TV show.
Mhm. And Phil Hartman co-wrote the movie.
Right. He made a
Yep.
cameo in the movie.
Yeah, he is in it. Blink and you miss him.
Right.
Kind of a
Yeah.
thing. Mhm.
But Paul Rubens was in Buffy the Vampire Slayer,
Yes.
which to me is one of the best characters in any movie ever. I want to rewatch the movie just to see him because he has the greatest death scene of any person ever in a movie.
Ooh.
It lasts half the movie. They keep flashing back to it as he's dying over and over and over. Just he's alone, and they just keep flashing back to him dying in the corner. I love that movie. I saw it in the theater originally. I got to see it again. I got to dig it out and watch it with my kids or something.
Yeah, I should see. I've seen some of the TV show, which is way different, but
Yeah.
I need to
Never watched
watch
the
that
TV
movie.
show.
Yeah.
Did see the movie.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's Pee-wee's Big Adventure was really good for roadside America because I read about the basement of the Alamo, which people at the Alamo still get questioned about.
I love that.
The basement of the
I
Alamo.
love that people are still asking that.
Yeah, and that movie's 35 years old. So almost 35 years old, I guess it is. Yeah, but
when I first started working here and just in museums in general, that was my family's like, "Are you going to be like the tour guide at the Alamo?" He's making an Adobe.
And now I'm going to have to do that when I give tours of this museum. I'm definitely going to have to do that. This is the Duryea.
Make sure you have some gum.
Oh, yeah. Smacking it up. Yeah,
And then at the end, when you ask if there's any questions, take it out. Are there any?
You're welcome to that. Trust me, when you come here, that will be your tour from me. Yeah, ask for Sam, and make sure I have a pack
stick
of
of
gum.
gum, yeah,
No, pack of gum. I need a lot.
Yeah, bring some gum with you, just in case. Just in case.
Absolutely, yes. So my library isn't as quite as big as this, but it's substantial enough that I'm proud of it.
Yeah, sure.
And your book there on Roadside America was published by the same publisher that publishes Collectible Automobile Magazine. And I have written a few articles for Collectible Automobile. I have a new one coming out shortly on the Corvette, which please run out and buy.
Yes, yes.
Keep me in my couple dollars that I get from Collectible Automobile.
Yeah.
Literally, I do not make a fortune.
Just let those royalty checks roll right in.
The royalty check. I get paid once. That's it. I get money once, and that's it. You can buy that magazine as much as you want. I get paid once. And it is not a lot of money, trust me. But it is fun to write. I do appreciate learning the history of these things. And when I do the research for these articles, I go through my library, I go through this library, I go through everybody's library looking for any background on stuff. A library that's completely online is a website called oldcarbrochures.com.
Ooh.
Use it all the time because they have scans of original brochures going back 100 years. So when I'm looking if I'm looking for information on a mid-60s Dodge Dart, I want to see how they advertised it. So I'll find the original brochure and go through and go, oh, here's what they called it, here's how they referred to it, here's who they sold it to, here's the options they said it had or didn't have. And I've done that for almost all the articles I've written because there's nothing better than the original literature.
Oh my gosh. No, there really isn't. That's where it all starts.
Yeah.
It's like a little treasure hunt.
And kids today don't know it because I don't know that they print literature anymore or as much.
Not like that. And honestly, like, car ads today are just kind of boring.
No.
I mean, there's not that many options.
Car ads today are money, gas mileage, safety,
Yeah.
and that's how they work.
Yeah, and I think some of it is like almost everyone in this country needs one. It's like a necessity now. It's not necessarily a status symbol or.
But getting you to buy that Hudson when it was new.
Right.
Why did I want the Hudson over the Ford or the Chevy?
Yeah.
Which was possibly a little cheaper.
Yeah.
Well, why would I spend money on the Hudson, which was a rarer mark? And well, because it was different, because it said something about me as the owner of that car. And books like that have the old advertising. I have a book. I think we have it here in the museum too. It's Any Color as Long as It's Black.
Yes.
Is the name of the book, and it's just old car advertising, and it shows this spectacular copy of old ads. The Jordan ad is always known for Just West of Laramie. Have you ever read that ad? There's not even an actual picture of the car in it. There's a silhouette of a car and a beautifully written piece about where the car is.
Oh, gosh.
And the owner of the car. And it has nothing to do with the car itself.
Yeah, it's not even just the images, the text.
Yes. It's something you don't get anymore.
Yeah.
I have a couple pieces of Duesenberg advertising, and there are two different ones, and they're beautiful sketches. They're beautiful black and white ink drawings of a Duesenberg in a beautiful setting, some beautiful mansion or something like this, and in the foreground is a man or a woman. I have two different ones. I have a man and a woman. But the text is just
I've heard that one.
What the car says about you.
Yeah.
And so, the book, the handful of books that I have that have the advertising, the literature in them, that go through that, and it's part of history that we just don't have. And fortunately, we do have these books to tell us about that.
Yeah. Love old ads. Look at old ads all day.
Yeah.
There's a couple books in here that are actually just ads. And that's where I need to avoid if I am to get anything done. on that
Oh, yeah.
particular day.
Yeah. When I go home, I'm going to dig out a couple old books here and spend
Yeah.
hours just going through. Oh, yeah, that's so great. Look at
Yeah.
this. And that'll be my day shop.
It'll be great. So thank you for, wasting your day with us.
Absolutely.
At least your
Yes.
afternoon. We
Please.
appreciate it.
Yes. Come back, tell your friends, share, link, like,
Yes.
do all that stuff. Post us on Facebook, Instagram, whatever you prefer as your social media. Tell your friends.
We have lots of videos on YouTube. There's literally...
Check out all the other ones down here.
Yes, that's right. There's literally some topic in there of interest to you. If
Yes,
you just
yep.
take a peek.
Most of them feature Kendra.
They do. Sorry, you're stuck with me.
A couple of them feature me. Most of them feature her.
But there's a lot in there, so we know that you will find something in there that tickles your fancy. So
Yep.
please go find it and tell your friends.
Tell all your friends.
Exactly.
Please spread the word. It's Afternoons with Kendra and Sam.
Thanks for joining us. We will see you next time.
Take care.
Bye.